Good afternoon, everybody. I'm
okay.
Very happy to see everybody here for Francis Daehoon Lee's encore presentation, basically. We saw him yesterday as well. And as I recall, there was actually so much content last time that people were clamoring for more. So I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to put his biographical information into, or link to it rather, in the chat. And I will turn it over to Mr. Lee. Thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming.
Thank you, Lindsay. Nice to see you again, Jocelyn, Kevin, and David. I listened about for 10 minutes to Monghwa Chow's presentation. That was also very interesting. I feel many connections to my topic today. Yesterday's moderator introduced today's session as a workshop, but that was not the case. That is not the case. I'm not able to do a workshop on the Zoom very well, especially within 50 minutes. So I just go on in the same style as yesterday, using my slides and talking for about 40 minutes, hopefully less than 40 minutes, and pedagogies, transformative pedagogies for peace education. So it's more narrowed down from yesterday's topic. Yesterday, I highlight the linkages between peace education and citizenship education. And today I want to focus on pedagogies, the process of learning, the principles of good learning. And also this is from my experience and study and thoughts in the past 20 years, especially working with the schools in South Korea and also with UNESCO very, very actively. Can you see my slides? Yes? Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So first, pedagogy. I mean, this is a synonym to education, but in for some theorists and some practitioners, they use it in different contexts. Education is involves lots of teaching, and pedagogy wants to assume that the reduction of teaching and the expansion of mutual and self-learning process by the learners would result in much better consequences. In South Korea, some people translate pedagogy as methodology or skills of teaching, and I think that's not really what pedagogy means. And historically, this concept has been put forward by progressive Brazilian educators and education movements from 1970s. And the most leading person was Paulo Freire. And his book, the first book, was actually named after this, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So historically, this concept is involved in liberating the learners from the institutional pressure that schools represent. UNESCO adopted some part of this philosophy of pedagogy from 1970s. So in UNESCO, they have been advocating, especially in teacher training programs, can you move your emphasis from what to teach to how to teach, and from how to teach to how to learn? So for about 50 years, one of the UNESCO's philosophical renovation advocated to teachers was that, can you move your emphasis from what to learn to what to teach to how to learn? So it's not simply techniques and ways of learning, it's a more deeper understanding of the transformative processes that learners go through. Probably we need more philosophies and more studies, research on processes of changes for the learners. So that's what I mean. So there can be many different creative ways that learners can promote their own learning if the teachers, if the educators adopt new approaches. So that's what I call transformative pedagogies. And doing peace education in South Korea for about 20 years. And many of you know that South Korean schools are heavy with competitive atmosphere because of the really serious college entrance exam, the pressure by the parents, among the students, and by the teachers, and the whole society. In my expression, is kind of obsessed with competitive air in the school. And through that, not many people really love teaching. Teaching becomes very, how to say, torturous practice. So I thought, can we drop teaching? Maybe at least in dropping teaching part, the whole part, maybe can we introduce facilitating for learning process? So it assumes very different role of the teachers. Maybe the name teacher has to change. Maybe the name educator should even change. Something like facilitator, supporter, or designer, or new terms for the profession of teaching should come about. And thinking in this way, and after doing research on creative pedagogies around the world, in humanities, arts, music, peace, education, citizenship education, my team, me and my team, Peace Momo, we came up with this idea that let the learners do something first, very important, and then go into observation. Then let them exchange their observations and ideas and feelings among themselves without much intervention by the teacher. And then the community reflection in the learners' community will arise quite naturally, and then it will help them to synthesize in their own languages. So I took the initial of this each of 5 stages, do, O, E, R, S, and it became a very nice word, doers. Okay, learners becomes doers in the 5-stage process. So it also captures the idea of change-oriented learning, transformative learning, and the learners actually do something in their community after the learning. So this is just one example. I'm not saying that doers is the best or the only pedagogical approach for a specific learning. I will jump into some examples. Now, I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned it today, a very hierarchical society. And this hierarchical culture is combined with, of course, economic competition in the market, highly competitive market there. Of course, it's combined with competition, but at the same time, I think in South Korea, we should not forget that the whole society and whole adult generation, they have gone through 30 years of military rule, more than 30 years of military rule. Such a period of top-down military style ruling must have created some deep cultural effect on people. So put together this, the authoritarian militaristic past and the competitive economy and the types of schools we have. And unfortunately, many of the initial founders of modern schools in South Korea, they were teachers in the Japanese colonial schools. And also we have to trace some of the school cultures back to colonial period at the same time. Anyway, put together in the school setting, students, learners should find it very, very difficult to associate with each other as equal beings, as equal citizens. So we devised this in order to avoid the photos with the faces of young people. I'm using the photos of adult programs. At the beginning, we spent 1 or 2 hours just exchanging greetings with each other. But exchanging greetings in the same way, hey, how are you? How have you been? Did you have good breakfast? This kind of greetings for 1 hour is very boring. So you can employ artistic creativity in greetings. So in the first few sets of greetings, you exchange greetings in the normal way. In the next sets of greetings, you exchange greetings in a foreign way. So you need to greet your fellow person, never in the Korean way. So then that's the first step of being creative. You have to do very strange new body movements and say something new and new facial expressions. And then in the next set of greetings, we ask the students to add 1 or 2 questions about the other person. So questioning with greetings. And then in the next stage, we ask learners to employ the language of feelings, emotions into the greetings. And in the final stage, everybody stands up and then there is a music, very nice music in the background. So then we drop language and we do sets of greetings with just body movements. And when you hear music in the background, and if you like the music, the body movements becomes like dancing. It becomes like a choreography. It becomes like a very beautiful dancing concert. And then we do this one group by another group, and other people observe the dancing style greetings to each other. It's sort of an emotional process. And then let's say we do this for about 2 hours and we sit down, and then naturally the talks go on and go on for more than 1 hour, how they felt, what they liked, and how they felt respected and being paid attention by so many people with so much smiles and so much welcoming, looks, and so many people listening to your stories and nobody says no or you did it wrong. So greetings, I emphasize in my teacher's training that humanity has evolved through greetings. No matter what culture, what language, what part of the globe you came from, the first thing you do when you meet somebody, stranger or your friend, we do greetings. And anthropologically, the gestures of greeting evolved from your intention to show to the other person that you don't have any motivation or intention to hurt him, hurt her. So I don't have any weapons. I'm smiling, I'm not tense, I'm not ready to attack you. I'm open, I'm ready to hug you because I see you, you don't have any weapons. Okay? So in peace studies, this long tradition of thousands and thousands of years of long tradition of greeting of humanity has a very important implications. It's a very important resource. So we expanded we diversify using artistic methodology so that learners become very quickly and naturally creative in doing their greetings. So that's one example. And from my experience, I can guarantee that I've done this in 40 different countries with 40 different groups of people, nationalities, teachers, young people. this is universal. They really like it, and community springs out in a couple of hours. A community of trusting and welcoming each other, accepting each other, and they are ready to do many challenging things. In a way, we were able to transform the community of strangers into a community of trusting people and people who are ready to challenge for new things. And then, as I mentioned yesterday, we employ more arts, and music is always important. In the background, there should be easy, comfortable, and emotion-related music in the background. The space has to be spacious, comfortable, and colorful. It should not resemble the typical classroom. I really pray for that every time we have a session. Okay, the classroom should not be copied in real learning process. And everybody becomes an artist. Yeah. And I would like to mobilize a little bit of information about history of arts. Okay. Arts was also intrinsic part of human evolution. Okay. Before state, before organization, before military, before commerce, there was arts. Whenever there is a community of people, there was arts. So what was the most ancient form of arts? Before you go hunting the next day, you are afraid and you want to avoid that hunting session because you are too young or weak, but your community is hungry. So they gather around the fire and exchange a little bit of food, and then they do the ritual, tomorrow's hunting session in ritual. So you practice yourself individually, but also you form a new community by exchanging different signs and sharing rhythms of your steps, and you have your whole community cheering up for tomorrow's hunting session behind you. So that was arts. Too bad in a capitalist society that artist has become a very, how to say, economically expensive profession. So there are some people who pay for arts and some people who do arts too as a way of earning. So, in a sense, market economy has detached arts from our daily life. But education is not totally marketized yet, fortunately. Yeah. So in education, we can bring that original form of humanistic arts back into the learning. Arts is a community forming process, the community forming learning process. That's what I mean. Everyone is an artist. If you have a body, if you have a soul, and if you have an emotion, and if you have a little bit of language, then everyone is an artist. So they become an artist. It's another elevation that people feel through this kind of process. Then sometimes, this is another example. Food is also very important in a community, right? So let's imagine that in the classroom, there are a group of 5 to 6 persons in a group. And then every person in turn, they are invited to share their favorite food. And the time is given for 1 minute. So you have to tell your friends in the small group that this is my favorite food. I like it because, and this spice is the best from that region, and you have to cook it in this way, etc. For 1 minute, it's not very long. But then you ask, whenever one person speaks, you ask the other 5 persons, the listeners, the community, to respond in your best way, recalling your experience of the greetings and welcome. Okay, so they have gone through for 1 hour or 2 hours. Okay, so please recall that experience, and please think about the best way you can respond to the speakers. So what is your best way of welcoming the speaker while you are listening to the story of favorite food? And then maybe some people don't know what to do at the beginning, but there are always a few people who catches the point, and then they give lots of claps and smiles and thumbs up and responses like, really? Where is that restaurant? Kind of responses, and they welcome and they show their consensus, how tasty the food is, etc. Some people do that. And when the second person's the first facilitator, will ask, can you do more? Okay, greetings is the first act of every human being when you meet somebody else. So I would say the first moment is the most important moment of encounter. So how can you maximize your responses, your body movements to the speaker at the first instance? So these are little hints. So when there's a 6 persons in a small group, then 6 persons will speak. There are 6 chances of enhancing your interaction with the speakers. And I can also tell you that this is a very beautiful process because moment is very important. If the body stops, your interaction starts. Like this kind of little hints. Then the group elevates one by one. And when the last person's and response becomes a totally new, it becomes a very new community. And it takes just 30 or 40 minutes. So how do we do this? First, think about what are the resources that humanity has acquired as most intrinsic in community formation. Food is one example, greeting is another example, smiling is another example, active body responses is another example. So you introduce these simple resources of human communities, and you design an activity very similar to a game, but also lots of factors from role play, theatrical presentation. You are on the stage, and there is an audience. So you act in a very intentional and holistic interaction with the audience. So, and then the exchange of feelings and exchange of dialogue naturally becomes equal, horizontal, and very complex and very, how do you say, intense among the learners. And you don't have to actually ask them to change. They change over a course of a few hours. And I believe that that's because these are human default. Our dignity and our sense of being dignified always comes in the relationship through the others. And I think every human person has this social desire to be seen, to be heard, and to be interacted with different other beings. So that's that. And in order to design this kind of activities, we also relied heavily on the pedagogical renovators such as Paulo Freire, and also theater of the field. I don't know how to translate that back to in English. It's the philosophy is very similar to Paulo Freire, but there was a theatrical activist, experts in Brazil and Latin America who believe that the principles of theater that includes role playing is intrinsic in human development. So when people immerse themselves in theoretical settings, they become actors and they become spectators, and they switch their roles, and they eventually transform themselves into spect-actors, okay? Acting and observing, and in response changing their act. So for them, theater is basically a transformative, preparatory learning tool for human evolution. So we learned a lot from that movement, and we thought that, you know, incorporation of those principles into pedagogy of peace education would be very, very productive. It has been. I will take a short break for you. Because long speech is always the worst thing to do for learning.
Francis, I think the theater that you were talking about is from Theater of the Oppressed, Auguste Boal.
Yeah, Auguste Boal, yes, that's right. And in English, it's Theater of the Oppressed.
Yeah, Theater of the Oppressed, or sometimes people say TOP.
TOP, okay. Okay, so just like the book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. In our first meeting with Kevin, we talked about Paulo Freire. We have a life connection through Paulo Freire.
I remember that very well, that conversation.
Yeah, I remember that, yes. Any other comments, short questions?
I really love your line, everyone is an artist. You know, and finding ways to cultivate that artist within, especially among students who might think they have no talent. I myself have very little talent, but I am often amazed at how I can inspire students to do much more brilliant things than I could model for them just by giving them that liberty to do it. Yeah,
that's right. Yes, we don't have to be a professional artist to introduce artistic process. But I still prefer the phrase, everyone is an artist by birth. Okay, let me continue then. And then in some mature stage of this peace education, you might conduct more sophisticated, more complex activities like this one. There are two games, and the teacher doesn't explain anything about the games. So then after finishing the games, they go through a puzzle solving process. So the teacher basically makes a very important, seemingly easy questions step by step. Some questions have to be very, very well, and the experience of the learners. And the two games are composed of the marionette, and the second one is make your triangle. The first game comes from theater practice also. Okay. Marionette is the master, one master controls the other person as a marionette. Okay, so it's a controlled game. That's what theater people do. But we devised the game into two stages. So at the beginning, every person does one-to-one marionette game, one master and one marionette, and change the role, the other master and marionette game. That's the first part. Okay? Then we feelings, and this is very exciting game. So they are very eager to share their feelings. You know, I felt down, I felt ignored, I felt like inhuman. How can you treat me like that? I almost fell down and you didn't even care. That kind of exchange comes out. Then my team, which the older learners stand up like in a spider web, and the person at the center becomes the supermaster, supreme master. And he controls with 2 hands, he controls 2 marionettes. And the first two marionettes, they are marionettes, but at the same time, the second level master. So 2 marionettes can control 2 marionettes with their 2 hands. So the sequence goes, the supreme master in the center and the 2 marionettes in the next circle, and then 4 marionettes in the next circle, and then like 16 marionettes around. So you can do this 4 circles, and you can do a group of 20 to 30 people. Then you play a music, and then you ask the supreme master to do a good dancing, then go to tango, and then go to rocks. And then this dance becomes much more complicated and much more violent, because people standing at the outer circle, they go crazy. They go very hectic because they cannot just follow the controlling hand. So that's marionette game. And then everybody giggles, laughs, and falls down, and the whole chain of reaction breaks down. And then you do a very different game called Make Your Triangle. Here, each person is supposed to pick 2 partners without telling them that they are chosen by you. Okay. So every person chooses 2 partners in secret among the group. So everyone has 2 partners, but they don't know who is who. And then you walk around so that you and your 2 partners becomes a triangle. So you are here and the 2 partners are here. Okay. So 3 persons, you and your 2 partners, should stand at each point of a perfect triangle. It takes 3 to 4 minutes, but the participants feel it very, very long. They become impatient. So they want to call out, come here, stand here, don't move. They become very impatient, but it's not 3 or 4 minutes, but it's still longer than the marionette game. Anyhow, so the emotion of impatience, I want to reach the perfect triangle as quick as possible, but they are not following my directions or my wishes. They're all going in different chaotic directions. I'm so unhappy. I'm so insecure in this situation. But the magic is, after 3 or 4 minutes, everybody come to a stop. Every triangle is different, but everybody finds 2 other their partners in a triangular position, equal distance to each other. So mathematically, that's possible because this game was also helped by a mathematician. So that's also possible. And then at the end, you ask people, okay, now if one of your 2 partners sits down, you need to sit down. If anybody next to you sits down, you don't have to care. Only if one of your two partners sits down, then you should sit down. Now, you can guess what happens now, right? This is a complex network situation. Everyone is linked with everyone else. So any one connected to more than one person. So there is at least one person who has to sit down, and the probability increases that he is connected to more than 2 persons. So more people sits down and the whole group sits down. It's a network effect. It comes from the mathematics of complex theory. Okay. So you do this, and the scene is like this. People fall down and very active. And then you ask people, how did you feel? What is your experience, etc. And then people begin to talk. And then you ask a question of comparison. Okay. How was your feelings and experiences in the marionette game different from your feelings and experiences in the triangle game? Okay. It's like, in the university, you are doing a comparative research. Yeah. Comparative insight gives hidden clues of two societies. It's the same thing. So comparative stage. The third question is always comparative in this type. And then they begin to compare. And then they find out that they had more decision-making, choices, and psychological stability in the triangle game than in the marionette game. They begin to question the autonomy or politically the sovereignty of each person in a system. And the final question is, can you make a similar comparison? There are systems, existing real systems in our society, which resemble the marionette game. And there is a very different system also in our society and in the globe, which resemble the triangle game. Then eventually the discussion developed, developed in a mature way, and they begin to discuss in the language of complex horizontal network system in comparison with hierarchical top-down command system. Because the marionette game represents commanding hierarchy, and the triangle game represents almost ecological complex networks. And that was the purpose of the design of the game. So without teacher telling anything, the students slowly go into systemic observation, how two different systems function and how they affect the people who compose the system emotionally, physically, and in terms of self-autonomy, and in terms of seeing, listening, and interacting. And after doing that intense game and thinking, it's a good time to introduce why the anthropocentric system is so different from ecological system. And this is one of the core philosophies we want to introduce in today's global citizenship education. Okay. This anthropocentric, or in other words, hierarchical, in other words, unequal, top-down. Some people have more decision-making and other entities do not have that decision-making. And it is represented in the language Mr. Chow has explained. But the ecological system, there is no up and down. They are in different positions in different places, but they are all connected. When one goes down, the others will eventually go down because it's a complex network. So then we can introduce this system thinking into the peace education. So let me stop. And then you can add all sorts of realities which represent racial discrimination, another hierarchical way of thinking, black and white hierarchies, so often appearing in the movies. These are very, very important topic in South Korea because as economically developed country, South Korean society is copying this white supremacy racism very, very rapidly, equating Koreans with white culture or white civilization. So this is a very alarming syndrome in South Korea. So you can relate to that. So let me finish. So quoting from Paulo Freire and Augusto Boal and theater approaches, artistic approaches, music approaches in education. Me and my team, we thought we can summarize transformative pedagogies as a combination of 5 pillars. First, participatory. Learning should be based on life of the learners, thinking and emotions of the learners from the first place, not from the knowledge and emotions of the teacher. So the deep sense of participation. Learning should be based on life, emotion, knowledge, and stories of the learners. And number 2, exchange. A supreme learning can be achieved through dialogue, much more than other method of teaching. Dialogue is the supreme way of learning. But dialogue, why I use the word exchange? Because dialogue is too logical. Dialogue is too logos, language from Latin. So exchange of feelings, exchange of your life, change of using all kinds of languages, not just logos languages, but your body languages, your eyesight, your thumbs up. So I want to call it exchange. It's a slight deviation from Paulo Freire. And number 3, of course, we are all artists. We are cultural beings. So every issue, every topic into artistic cultural form. And number 4, creative, critical, meaning that if learners twist the initial representation of the reality in their own way, I want to act this way. No. This time I want to play the teacher. No. This time I want to play the scolding father. Okay, so this is what we call creative critical. If they twist the given reality in a creative way, they transform themselves. So there are lots of ways of twisting the reality by the learners. And number 5 is the role of questions, especially not questions for more knowledge, but questions that surprise you. So this idea of estrangement for awakening people, it originally comes from many different religions. In Buddhism, in Christian, early Christian time, the great leaders used this surprising question methodology for learning. But then also from theater tradition, there is a tradition of highlighting shocking questions during the theater. So there is a pedagogy of estranging in our tradition. So these are, for me, very important transformative pedagogies. I'll stop here. I used too much time again. So thank you very much for sharing my few thoughts of mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very interesting presentation. I think it had a lot of really engaging ideas that I think many of us are looking forward to trying in our own classrooms. We do have about 6 minutes remaining if anybody would like to ask some questions. I don't see any in the chat yet, but now is your opportunity. Also, we're small enough that please feel free to just unmute yourself and just ask.
I have used the theater of the oppressed in my classes in the past, and I really enjoyed it. I got students to try to act also and act out a situation and then act it out again with a different mindset, right? And I think that in language learning, we have translation, but we have transmediation, and I think that there are many of these trans words that can be applied to the creative, critical aspect, and that we need to take more advantage of in our classes.
It's great to know that there are parallels in language education.
Francis, I also wanted to ask a couple questions.
Sure.
What really strikes me about this work is how much it's from the margins, and it's speaking back and resisting what we consider unjust norms. So what I'm really curious with your work with Peace Momo and the other work that you do is how you nurture and sustain these alternative spaces for education within a system that itself is not conducive to this sort of work. You spoke about the market economy and neoliberalism and those sort of things, and the sort of marginalization of art in society. So I'm just really curious from your reflective stance, how you're able to continue to sustain that movement when the system isn't really open to it. And then my second question for you is around race. I think your comments about race were really interesting. And so I'm curious here if you find that race and racism is becoming more of a lens of inquiry within Korea. I find that gender and class are really common, but is race a topic that the students and your participants work out more? So those are my two questions.
Right. So race is a still sensitive topic to be discussed in school rooms because majority of Koreans believe that we are the victims of racism, not the predators yet. But luckily, since 1990s, there is an influx of migrants, especially migrant workers, into South Korea. So there's more than 3 million migrant status people living together in South Korea. So the education offices, education institutions had to employ what they called multicultural education for the purpose of living together happily with migrant families in the schools and so forth. And in multicultural education, it was, for me, it was a bypass of the topic racism. So it's sensitive, they want to take it directly. So it's multicultural education. So it's one of the topics in that education that racism comes up. But still, we are finding it very, very difficult to navigate within the given system to raise this agenda. And second, luckily in South Korea, there has been a tradition of good teachers who tried, who were very serious of reforming the school system and reforming the town education, etc. So those teachers, and luckily with the democratization movement, there were lots of education activists and civil society who engaged in human rights education, gender education, and citizens education. So Peace Momo at the beginning tried to invite these people together to think about pedagogical transformation. Okay. So how can you improve your work through pedagogical transformation, and how can you add more peace agenda to that? And they, these workshops became popular. We are free from UNESCO constraints and school constraints, so we were able to explore lots of new things. So these workshops became very, very popular among the participants, and they went back to school and school institutions and research institutions, and they began to invite Peace Momo trainers into schools and into teacher training official programs. And now, last election, we had a wonderful majority of the education chief, regional chief, they were elected from this progressive teachers movement. So we had expansion of opportunities of working with schools on this.
Do you offer summer programs for those of us who are maybe not in Seoul or who are kind of busy during the semester?
Online and offline, there are programs, fixed programs like Peace Momo. So for English programs, you may apply. English programs are usually in autumn.
In autumn, okay,
yeah,
but online.
Yeah, online. Offline programs, we are beginning to organize from this year. We have stopped for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Offline programs. The best way is to get the news from Peace Momo. Sorry about this. And if I have your emails or something, I will post it whenever there is one.
Okay. I saw you on Facebook, so I will add you. Please add me.
Yeah, I do that very often. Yes.
You can also feel free to join the Korea TESOL Facebook group. And if you have something coming up, just remind us that you presented for us and we all enjoyed it, and people should come to, whatever workshop you have coming up. I think our audience would really appreciate it.
Wow, you're so dedicated to your role. Yes, I will. Yes, I will.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time, but I hope that this kind of conversation does continue, not only here at the conference, but beyond the boundaries of the conference as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having
dedication.
me. So, yes.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye and see you again.
See you.